Katia has worked in the community of mental health in the Pioneer Valley as a director of young adult and adult community services programs and a program for the prevention and treatment of early psychosis. An experienced supervisor and trainer, Katia has supervised clinicians, students, and teams of staff and has practiced in residential, forensic, community, outpatient, and private practices settings. She has provided consultation to agencies in a number of areas. Katya is a certified DBT clinician and a certified juvenile court clinician. Primary clinical practice areas include adolescent and young adults with histories of trauma and persistent mental illness. Katya holds an MSW from Boston College and a PhD in social work from Smith's College School for Social Work. She is currently the Senior Director of Practicum Education at Smith's College School for Social Work and a mother of a teenage son. So please welcome Ms. Katya Cesar, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here as a parent of a teen who's also learning to drive right now. We're deep in anxiety land. So I put together a short PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to go through that's kind of basic, and then we'll get into some deeper questions. So, there are varying levels of anxiety, and I'll try to speak to those as I go through my presentation, and hopefully we'll get to sort of all the different levels of functioning that you're seeing in your kids. So let me just take a minute to share here. And we'll do slideshow from the beginning. Okay. So I also have a quick video that I may or may not use, and hopefully the sound is working on that. I can never quite figure that out. So if it's not working, we'll just skip that. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about back to school. We're all at the beginning of the school year. A lot of kids, it's very normal for us as parents and for our kids to have anxiety about going back to school. We all experience a certain level of anxiety. I do want to mention that since the onset of the pandemic, there's also an extra layer of loss and grief and trauma and anxiety that we're all carrying. And for kids who were in school, probably elementary school at this point, if they're teens, juniors, sophomores, they've experienced long separations from schools that in many ways we haven't seen go back to pre-pandemic levels. And so I just want everyone to keep that in mind as we're talking about school anxiety. I certainly am still struggling sometimes with back in the office anxiety, which is sort of the adult equivalent. So, and I'm going to talk about school avoidance and then the concept of perfectionism, which we're seeing in a lot of our kids based on the changing economic landscape, AI, different ways of thinking about whether college is worth it or not. And then with each of those things, I'm going to talk a little bit about some not necessarily preventative strategies. You can do some of this proactively, but strategies to combat things in the moment. And then I'll follow up with some final tips and takeaways. And then there's some resources, which I'm going to leave with our facilitators here so that if people want the PowerPoint, they can have that and or get copies of the resources that I put together. So we're going to start with back to school. So kids have had the entire summer off. Some of us, depending on what we do, have had parts of the summer off or taken some time off. And so in the summer, things tend to slow down. There's either less routine or there's no routine. I know for my kid who's a little bit older, he had a sort of on and off summer job. He had camp for a couple of weeks, but most of his summer was really unstructured. Demands have been really low for many kids, and getting back into routine can be really tough. So it is, as I said earlier, it's totally normal to feel some anxiety, even for us as parents, with that routine going from a more kind of amorphous, loose place to a tighter place. And so you may have some transitional challenges with wake ups and getting ready and getting people out the door. Some kids are more prone to school anxiety than others, and so I'll talk about those. So if there are children that are starting in a new school, maybe moving from a middle school to the high school, that may be a new building or a new wing in the school. For elementary kids, it could be elementary to middle school. That's a pretty big transition for elementary kids. It can be hard for kids who have already have challenge being away from parents. If you have kids that have some separation issues, kids who have anything going on in their personal lives, like losses, a move to a new geographical area, divorce, loss of a close friend. There was a year that like 2 out of 3 of my son's best friends went to another school, and he had a really hard time going back to school that year. The other thing is, if we're nervous about school, we need to be very aware of that because kids can read us really well, especially if you have kids that have histories of trauma or extreme loss, attachment challenges. Those kids are better readers of human behavior than we are most times. So check your own feelings and make sure that you're not projecting any of that stuff onto your kids. Listen to their worries. Validation goes a really long way. So that can be challenging, particularly as we all ramp up in September and maybe our jobs get busier. We've probably exhausted our vacation time and we're looking at maybe being working now up until a holiday break, if you even get that. So that can be challenging, but really listen to your kids and express understanding about new teachers, new kids, new schools, new social situations. They don't necessarily need you to fix it. Just to be casual, to be a listener, to kind of reflect back to them what you're hearing, and asking questions that are more casual, that aren't using language around anxiety or worry. So saying, do you know what you're going to be doing in English this year? Rather than, are you worried about your English teacher this year? Which then brings the idea that maybe they should have something to worry about. Help your kids make plans to deal with anything specific they may be worried about. So, if they're worried about a particular teacher because they've heard bad things, or maybe there's somebody who's been a problem in school that they're now going to be in their homeroom with, that they're concerned about, or maybe the work is getting harder, they're taking a class that they feel nervous about. See what the specific issue is and see if there's a way to help them make plans around how to deal with that. We're already kind of into the start of the year. Proactively, you could do sort of practice runs to the school, driving there, getting used to the building, identifying the door to get in. Teachers are usually there before kids. You could make arrangements to meet one of the teachers there, or walk around the building if it's a new building. Talk with support staff. If you have concerns and your kid tends to be more anxious than usual, or it feels like a kind of debilitating kind of anxiety, connect with the school through the adjustment counselors or the school psychologists and ask for support in sharing your concerns, whether it's through them or speaking with a support staff or even the principal, depending on the size of your school. You could arrange a handoff with an identified staff person who could maybe engage your kid about something that's not related to their anxiety, like asking them to help out with something or getting them immediately engaged in something that's going on for them in the school. And then definitely reinforce a good first day or the fact that they even got through the day. Reinforcement is just as important as validation. So you do the validating ahead of time and the reinforcement afterwards. We'll talk a little bit about some behavioral language today. And then if the anxiety persists, which we'll talk about some of the signs and symptoms, you may need more support than just connecting with teachers or connecting with a school counselor. Some school counselors can do a lot in the school setting. If you have an IEP for social emotional issues for your child, you may already have some built-in support. Maybe that needs to be tweaked a little for the year, or maybe that isn't enough support and you want to discuss kind of outside of school support for your child. Often schools have a list of psychologists, social workers, licensed mental health counselors that they tend to recommend in your local area. So in summary, there's some behaviors that could just be transitional. So with low level behaviors, in a middle schooler, I might say extra clinginess or some whining or discomfort going to school. Some of that may just be transitional, and you should try to push through that, unless it gets really extreme and you're not even able to get them into the car in the morning or onto the bus. Give a lot of positive attention and encouragement. Listen and engage with your child. Reinforce and validate any pro-social school behaviors and ask for support from the school. Never feel like you're asking for too much. It's your right as a parent to ask for support, and there is support in the schools, even though it may be difficult sometimes to get in touch, or you may have to ask a few times. Stay persistent because it's there. Get a friend who's been through it to help support you, or look for groups that support parents in engaging with school personnel. You may have that as part of a plan as well. So here I wanted to put down sort of some of the reasons that our kids have anxiety. There are lots of reasons, but in general, these are a few. So there may be worry about making friends or fitting in. Kids are self-conscious to begin with. We'll talk more about perfectionism soon, but there's a lot that is going on socially for kids, especially in middle school and early high school, when they're trying to figure out who they are and where they fit in. Social issues like bullying, both in and out of school, and now with social media, that bullying has elevated to a whole nother level. We're starting to see some schools asking for kids not to have phones in class, or to be putting them away, or even banning them from school altogether, which is probably, in my book, moving in a positive direction. But not all schools are there yet. So, that cell phones can bring with it a lot of social issues. Homework or classes may be confusing for kids. Math, English. Kids feel pressured to learn in a way that doesn't work for them. We all have different learning styles, and sometimes the learning process that's happening in your kid's classroom or classrooms may not be working for your kids. So they may feel pressure around that. They may have difficult relationships with teachers in general, or with a teacher in particular. They may be having experiences outside of school that you're aware of, like death, divorce, other major losses, illness in the family. As a family, you may be helping to provide care for loved ones. The child may take that on as a concern. There may be economic difficulties in the family that the kid is aware of, or new members living with the family. So those are all kind of outside things that may contribute to anxiety that then carries itself into the school day. The school environment may just not be a good fit for your kid. I have a close friend with a neurodivergent child who had done really well in a very small elementary school. And when she went to middle school, it just wasn't working for her. And she found a really great online program that allows the kids to be in the classroom on days that work for them, and also allows kids to really make their own curriculum. And then the child will take a graduate equivalency exam. And at this point, that child is doing a dual enrollment in community college locally and thriving. So the environment, depending on your kid, may not work. And so that's something you want to pay attention to. I just mentioned neurodivergence, but any pre-existing neurodivergence or new neurodivergence or mental health challenges can add to anxiousness in school. And then any learning needs like dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, or autism are examples of things that may make school anxiety worse for some kids. Let's see. How do the kids and us as adults know that our kids are anxious? So I want to say up front that a lot of these behaviors are normal behaviors. And sometimes with adolescents, it's really difficult to tell, like, is this problem or is this just my kid being a teenager? And a lot of it can go under my kids being a teenager, but you want to pay attention to when kids are demonstrating excessive behaviors in a certain area or in many areas, or I call them life disrupting behaviors, so that it's actually disrupting a child's ability to learn, to move through the day. It's impacting your work schedule, the rest of your family. And things are just it feels like things are out of control. That would indicate that there's a problem going on that's not easily managed. So you might see kids not wanting to get up and get ready and maybe outright refusing, saying they can't go. They may be worrying about a lot of small issues that to you as a parent or caregiver feel sort of not important, but the kid is hyper focused on these small details. A lot of anxiety manifests itself somatically, like through our bodies, and you may know that already. When I'm stressed out, I tend to get headaches. I tend to have GI problems. Kids get this a lot, and you mostly will hear about stomach aches and headaches, sometimes other physical symptoms. They may not be sleeping well. I should have added eating in here as well. They may not be eating or sleeping well. They may be talking about that, or you may notice that they're looking very tired. You may hear from the school that they're falling asleep in class. They're not doing their schoolwork and their grades are dropping. If you have a kid that tends to get good grades, but suddenly those are getting worse and they're not kind of self-correcting, that can be an issue. Irritability. All teens are irritable, but I'm talking about sort of extreme irritability at home or at school, which includes some sort of flashes of anger, acting out that is excessive from what you know about your kid. And then on the opposite end, seeming very low in mood, quiet, looking sort of depressed and withdrawing from any activities that seem they would typically be engaged in and enjoying. So, an example I can think of is they suddenly don't want to play soccer, but they've played every year and they don't want to play with the team and they're kind of refusing to try out, or they're just kind of going in their rooms, shutting the door, and you're not seeing them. Sometimes they may come out for dinner, but then they're going right back in. So those kinds of behaviors. And there may be others, but these are kind of the general ones that you may notice. This may be, I have to say that I worked in therapy with families and kids, and teens often can feel embarrassed doing exercises or doing things like this exercise, which if it doesn't work, I'll describe it. But they actually can get kind of into it if you go along with it, and you can kind of make fun of yourself and the exercise with them. So let me see if the sound works on this, and if one of you could just tell me, can you hear that?
Well, we can't hear the sound, but I wonder, Alex, if you happen to be listening and you're still here, is there something you know we can do to add sound?
Let's see.
I I'm looking at audio settings on my thing. I just don't know.
Let's see. I'm going to stop it.
Okay. Yeah. When we saw it move, but not the audio.
Okay. So this is linked in the PowerPoint. How do I get out of this?
You know what you could do really quick is, do you see the arrow next to audio? Click on leave computer audio. There's a little arrow next to audio.
Yes.
Click on, scroll down to leave computer audio. And then try it.
Let's see. What is it called? Leave computer audio?
Correct. It's like the second to last setting.
Okay. Oh, it does. The second to last one is screenshot borders for me.
Oh. Do you
Yeah, I
see
see the leave. I see the one you're talking about, Julie, but on mine, but
It's not hugely important.
hmm.
Location camera.
if it doesn't work, we could drop it in our Facebook tomorrow, right?
Yeah. All right. Let's see. I feel like I lost my PowerPoint here. Okay. Can you see the PowerPoint now?
Yeah, and I think if you
Okay.
hit from current slide up top, right, that'll bring you back.
Yeah. So basically what she's describing, sorry about that. We'll try to, there is a link to this in the resources, but what she's talking about is this iceberg exercise where you you draw an iceberg and you kind of start at the top where you show what are the behaviors that we're seeing. The middle of the iceberg is sort of what are the things that the child is thinking and feeling, and then underneath, and you just kind of wonder out loud about that with your kids, like I'm wondering if you're feeling this, or I'm wondering if you're thinking this, and then the bottom would be sort of what's contributing, and that's a place where you really listen to sort of what are the things that are leading me to those thoughts and feelings. So, it's a three-part thing. With a teenager, with a younger kid, you might want to draw the iceberg. You could still do that with a teenager. I did a lot of art with my teens, all the way up to 19 and 20. But they do get into it. But with an older kid, you may want to just make 3 columns maybe and try to put things in that order. So that's, oh, sorry about that. I'm trying to move to the next one. Okay. Okay, so I want to move into school avoidance. And there is a term that we throw around a lot. Sometimes you'll hear schools talk about school refusal. The thing about the word refusal is that it makes it sound like kids are making a choice, and they are making a choice in that they could make a choice to go. But for a kid that's having extreme anxiety, it really doesn't feel like a choice. The refusal is a survival strategy. So that's why we try to stay away from the word school refusal. But school avoidance is when a child or a teen avoids going to school for an extended period of time, or consistently is late or leaves early. And that can happen for a variety of reasons, including emotional distress. So you really kind of want to get a handle on why, if it's that your kid is late every morning, what is going on? An example that I can give you, I did, I haven't done them for a while, but I would be called in when in Massachusetts, we call them child in need of services, a CHINS assessment. And the court will send an evaluator in. In that case, it was my role to go in and figure out what's going on for the kid. 9 times out of 10, there was a mental health reason that the kid was having problems. It was very rarely behavioral. So with one particular kid, it got to the point where the principal was having to go to the house and try to pick the kid up because they weren't getting to school. Once he was in school, he was having difficulty going from one class to the next if he made it to school. And after sitting with him for a couple of sessions and doing some evaluation, we figured out that this child, and this was from questions in school, questions of the guidance counselor, speaking to the mom, speaking to the dad, that this child was struggling with OCD, which he had not shared with anybody, but was getting caught up in his morning routine and literally could not leave the bathroom because he had these very rigid steps that he would have to go through. And if he didn't complete them the right way, he would have to start over. And this was causing him to be late day after day. The courts were thinking of it as a behavioral issue. Once we figured that out, he got treatment for OCD, got medication, and he was fine. And so you really have to pay attention to sort of what are the things that are causing this in the first place. So it can start in a number of ways. School, being out of school for a period of time, including summer, but even for medical illness or social emotional reasons, or learning difficulties or life events. Once they've been out for a period of time, coming back can be challenging, especially if there's pre-existing stuff there. Home is a low demand, safe, and comfortable place, and it's fairly reinforcing for most kids. The longer that kids are out of school, the harder it is to get them back. So you could go from basic avoidance to, quote unquote, a refusal to go to school, which again, that's a survival strategy. It's not necessarily a choice. It may be, I'm not going to rule it out, but most often it's not. The kid doesn't experience it as a choice. So I'm going to talk a little bit about positive and negative reinforcement, which are behavioral terms. So in terms of school avoidance, what kids are trying to avoid are usually fears, academic stress, physical discomfort, which may come up from anxiety in the first place when they're there, avoidance of separation from parents or caregivers, fears of getting sick or having panic attacks, worry about feeling sad in school, and also worry about failing. The positive reinforcement, the behavior or the things that are reinforcing them to continue to avoid school, or what they get by avoiding, are access to preferred activities, access to food, low demand environment, and increased attention from family, and access to pets. Access to pets is a big one for me. But it may be something that, kids are also attached to family pets, and there may be some comfort in that. So what we need to figure out is how do we decrease the negative reinforcement, or switch those, that it should be more negatively reinforcing to be home than it should be to be back in school. So you want to ask the child, what is causing the distress? What is the hardest about going to school? What part of the day is most difficult? What makes you feel the most worried or anxious or nervous about being in school? And you also want to get teachers' perspectives, parents' perspectives, counselors' perspectives on what they're seeing, because you want a full picture. Let's see. And what are they getting positively from being home? What are they doing? Really go hour by hour. What are they doing each hour of the day? How are they spending their time? What activities are particularly reinforcing for them? Is there food or certain things they're doing? Video games, for example, that they may be playing at home. Make a plan to remove those reinforcers as much as possible. So screen time, internet. I know I have a switch on my phone where I can turn the internet off. at my house if I want to. Make a plan for gradual reentry in a step-by-step plan, and you want to work on that with the school to gradually get them back there. And that can be challenging, and every kid's going to be different. So the steps to get your kid in there may be different than the steps to get my kid back. And I'm going to talk now about perfectionism, which is a growing issue. So there's an article that's quoted a lot around perfectionism from 2019 by Kern and Hill, and I'll just read this quick paragraph. I have the link here for a discussion of the article, but basically what it says is that life has become more challenging for young people, I would say all of us, over the last 50 years, particularly in the last 10 to 15 years, in a variety of ways, according to analysis of social and economic conditions in the industrialized world, which points to a growing emphasis on competition and individualism. Along with other cultural forces, these shifts may be increasing the pressure that young people feel to achieve, excel, and reach idealized levels of success and perfection, the researchers said. As a result, many teens feel and young people feel like they are not good enough, no matter how much they accomplish, ultimately fueling a rise in perfectionistic traits. I've certainly seen this among the kids in my, basically the high school age kids and my friends' kids and people that I'm talking to and thinking about their kids. So perfectionism is a mix of excessively high, and again, we can all be driven to do well, but I'm talking about excessively high personal standards. I have to excel at everything I do. And then intense self-criticism. I'm a complete failure if I fall short. So in its unhealthiest forms, perfectionism can lead to eating disorders, depression, high blood pressure, and suicidal thoughts. So it's a serious issue, and it's not just high achieving, wealthy kids. It's across the spectrum, the economic spectrum, the age spectrum. It's across the whole industrialized world. So these are some of the symptoms that you might see. Excessive self-criticism. I'm so stupid. I hear that a lot, and it's really upsetting for me as a parent to hear that. Or I'm not good enough. A fear of failure, a dread, like a sort of avoidance of doing things so that they don't make mistakes. Unrealistic standards, like having unattainable goals or believing that anything less than perfection is a failure. Obsessive behaviors, really spending. I actually spoke with one of our graduate students this summer who was struggling with this and was a self-identified perfectionist, and talked about how in high school and college she really struggled because she wanted everything to be so perfect that she would spend all this time on her assignments, rechecking her work, and it was so extreme that she couldn't get the work in. And that was playing out as a graduate student this summer. And so we talked about that a little bit and how she was working with her advisor to try to do a good enough assignment. Avoidance, so shying away from tasks that they used to enjoy or new activities because they think they won't be perfect at it. Difficulty dealing with mistakes. You'll see sort of intense frustration, spiked anxiety, or extreme reactions to very small errors. Again, I don't want to oversimplify. Girls tend to be more outward with their feelings and sort of talking about these things. I think boys tend to turn it inwards. We certainly have girls turning a lot of things inwards and having boys acting out, but around these things, you may be able to hear this more from your female identified kids. But extreme reactions to small things, and then viewing things in very black and white terms. So an A- is a failure because it's an A-, not an A. So that's sort of, those are typical examples of perfectionism. So young adults have, in this study that I just talked about, young adults have described pressure to appear flawless in every domain. And again, I want to just bring up social media because this has really increased the challenges in this area because they can compare themselves to everyone else. So they've got to be perfect at schoolwork. They've got to be great athletes. They've got to excel at their activities. They have to keep up with their peers and also looks. And so with social media, that's kind of raised the bar in terms of teen perfection. And we're even younger kids. We're seeing this in tweens at this point, where kids may take down a post if it doesn't get a certain amount of likes. And there's a specific number that kids tend to be looking for. I forgot to write that down, but it's a thing apparently. So there's a term now that researchers are using called child contingent self-esteem, which as adults, we can also be perfectionistic. So that's the tendency for parents to base their own self-worth on the success of their child. I grew up with a parent like that, so I know that very well. I knew that nothing would probably be good enough for my parent, and my mother would reinforce things that had to do with status and achievement, and then de-emphasize things that did not have to do with that. So parents now, in some of these surveys that they did, parents were responding and kids, that they're spending more time than they ever have on schoolwork with their children, while the hanging out, sort of just chilling with kids has declined. So parents are more focused on, the college process, grades, getting their children to participate in ACT and SAT courses, AP classes, honors classes, what their grades are going to be. We now all have access to our kids' grades in real time, many of us, in these apps that schools are making, so we can see our kids' grades and be really engaged in that. I know that's stressful for my son. And I've been guilty of sending him emails saying, why did you get a C on this assignment? So, we can make this worse for our kids. So between 1986 and 2006, the number of kids who said their parents surveilled their every move has doubled. So we can LoJack our cars, we can see their location on our phones, we can see their grades in real time, we can get onto their friends' Instagram accounts, see what's happening there. So kids are feeling that more now. 33% of teens feel they have to be perfect to be approved of by friends and parents. Teens believe that others judge them harshly. And I want to say teens it's part of what happens as a teen. You are self-conscious and self-focused. So when I talk about they believe others judge them harshly, that self-consciousness or judgment factor has gone up for kids. They see schools and families as unreasonably demanding, even if we're not being unreasonably demanding. And psychologists talk about this as the most debilitating form of perfectionism. Youth feel that they've let us down by bottoming out on a test score, missing a shot in a basketball game, or not getting into their first choice college. And it is also associated with major psychopathology like anxiety and depression. So it is a real thing. So some of the ways that might be helpful in terms of trying to combat this is, again, listening and empathizing or identifying with your child by saying, we're all feeling the same pressure. And I really hope that you'll talk to me if I can do anything to make things easier. Maybe making suggestions about ideas that you have, but again, universalizing it for them. Kids really want us to be empathic about their struggle. And again, validation about how tough it is out there will go a long way for kids. Just reflecting that things have gotten worse. Even highlighting this article saying it's a real thing now, like everyone's feeling this double and triple what they were 20 years ago. The other thing is we need to practice what we preach. So if we say kindness is the most important trait in someone, but all we're focused on is high achievement and status, this communicates to kids that the parent values those traits more than kindness. So we really need to be mindful that our actions are matching what we're talking about. I've already shared that it's associated with pathology. And then there's a link here for the article where this is an article that also talks about the research in a little bit more of a digestible way. Okay. So finally, just some final tips and takeaways. Anxiety is normal to a certain extent, and so it's important for us to identify when it isn't. When it gets beyond mildly disruptive or really just worrying about what's going on for your kid and it starts to disrupt their capacity to learn, to move through life, to get work done, to move forward, and it's interfering with the family and day-to-day stuff, it's a problem. Manage your own anxiety so it doesn't become your kid's anxiety. Listen to your kid. I mean, just sitting and listening to your kids' worries is a helpful activity. Engage in their lives. It can be hard. Again, some of us have 1, 2, 3 jobs that we're juggling. Find time to engage in your kids' school life. Ask about their schools, their lives there, their homework, their friends, their teachers, and be way casual about it. How's it going? You know, tell me about your day. You might get a one-word answer, but the engagement is what's important. Validate the worries they have, amplify any successes they have out loud. It's okay to act silly or embarrass them around that, or embarrass yourself. They're going to remember the feeling, not what you did. Ask for help. Again, ask for help from the school. Don't feel like you're asking too much or you're being a pain in the butt. Be a pain in the butt if you need to. Your kid comes first. Seek help from a counselor or therapist when things go beyond situational and or just basic back to school worries. And again, the school is a great place to start. They often keep lists. They could connect you even with a parent who may have seeked out support from a therapist. Practice what you preach. If you say to your kid, I only want you to be happy, then mean it, not only if they get an A or winning goal. And then your child isn't an extension of you. So don't base your own self-worth on the success of your child. They are becoming independent. It's painful. It's painful when they grow up and we don't want them to. And they do feel like little parts of us, but they are their own people. And so we need to let them be individuals and let them separate from us. That is their job right now. They will feel it if we treat them like part of us. We have to let them go and support them as individuals. So I'm going to stop there. Here are some resources. I used a lot of these resources to sort of get a sense of what's happening. So I just put down some of the ones that had some digestible and kind of easy access support and kind of step-by-step instructions. In Massachusetts here, we have a helpline that helps parents called masshelpline.org, which helps you find support and care for your kids in the state of Massachusetts. Other states may have similar things. And I find myself mentioning AI a lot, but you can, a positive use for AI is it can fetch these things for you. So if you say to AI, please make me a list of online resources for teens with anxiety, it will come up with a whole bunch of links for you and you can sort of check those out. So that's a good use of AI for parents. And it can make other lists for you as well. Give me a list of tips to combat back to school anxiety. It can come up with stuff like that for you. So I think I'm gonna stop there and open it up to questions, and I'll do the best I can with questions, and hopefully folks feel like they can find resources. And again, I'm going to leave the PowerPoint with the team here. So if people want access to this, they'll have it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
That was really, I'm in the throes of really, when you talked about letting go and letting them just make mistakes, and I have a 14-year-old daughter, so I'm right in it right now. And it's like, how much do I, and how much do I try to help her? How much do I pull away?
Mhm.
She's starting to think about walking to school with a friend, and taking public transportation this year. And I'm like, what do I do? How do I do this? So, um, it's such a challenge right now. The
It
whole
is.
no,
And
is
we're also in a different world. I mean, I took public transportation at the age of 10 in Washington, D.C. to get to school by myself with my 6-year-old sister. I wouldn't send my son at 10 years old on public transportation by himself. So, it's where things are different. And I know our generation like always says things back in my day, but there really has been a shift.
big
And
time.
the world isn't safe for lots of people right now, especially, parents of children of color, folks who are immigrants, undocumented folks, kids in our trans and gender expansive communities. There's real fear there. There's a lot of real reasons for anxiety right now. And I want to make sure to mention that as well. If you have kids with any of these identities right now, the anxiety is very easy to validate because it's real anxiety. It's not just a figment of their imagination.
Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that. I had a question around that, but I want to ask this question first. So you have a teenager and they're super anxious about going to school, and then you have like a 6-year-old, or a kindergartner who's starting school, and they're watching their sibling totally anxious. Like, how do you support the teenager at the same time? Don't let it filter down to the child that's starting kindergarten and really excited about it, but sees their sibling kind of freaking out about school.
Yeah, I mean, what I can say about that is that there are two totally different developmental levels. And so when you're talking to a kindergartner, you want to talk in very simple terms. I was thinking about school shootings, actually. For example, how you might talk to a younger child in first grade or kindergarten versus how you might talk to a teenager about it. Because often that topic, that's another place where kids can get anxious. And there haven't been any local school shootings, but my son has talked about it before. So, I what I think about is number one, trying to engage the older child in, your sibling is just starting school and you have every right to feel anxious. And why don't we talk about that by ourselves so that we don't impact your siblings, sister, brother, their experience of going to school. And then in very simple terms, helping the younger one understand that the teenager has other kinds of worries that they may be having that have nothing to do with the experience that your younger kid is going to have. But again, in very simple terms. So you'd have to think about sort of developmentally, where are they? I don't know about most folks, but I know in kindergarten they do a lot of like practice. So I remember going to the school for my son to practice the bus ride, and they all went to the school and then they rode the bus like before school started. And I remember in middle school there was a step up day, so the elementary kids in 6th grade got to go visit the school, and all the older kids had the clubs out and they sort of talked about that. But there's not a lot of, so I think there's some of that practice stuff that happens for younger kids that may get them more engaged in a way that our older kids don't get.
Mm, totally makes sense. I have another question, talking about, so if a child does identify as LGBTQ and has having anxiety around school, maybe about bullying, is it is it different? Like, is there a way that it can reach out to somebody who maybe has the same identity as them? Does that make sense? As a parent, can they be helpful? Is there a teacher? Like, what would make sense for that community?
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, I really think it's important to number one, see if there are safe spaces in the school that you can identify. a lot of schools do. I mean, I know this because we have social work students that are placed in schools that are developing whole programs for LGBTQ kids and doing incredible groups and activities with kids. So there may be resources that already exist. And again, a school counselor or school psychologist can help connect you with those things. If you're in a state that's less friendly, that's a bigger issue. Then I think it's upon us as parents to, again, the school counselors may have this information, even if their school isn't super supportive of LGBTQ groups and our trans and gender expansive kids, but there may be outside community engagement opportunities. So finding a club outside of school or a drop-in center for LGBTQ teens. There are all kinds of like online supports now and Facebook groups for teens and talk spaces for teens. So then I would look for some of those. And if it's safe enough, even encouraging your teen to maybe start something with a friend in the school, if they're a leader and you can kind of engage them in that and maybe offer to support that or see if there's somebody in the school who can support that club or that sort of leadership opportunity for the kid.
That's great. Thank you.
Does anyone else have questions or want to pull?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So I have it's based on me. I have a my God, I can't remember his age. a 7-year-old, no, 8-year-old son. So, oh my gosh. And there's been a lot that's been going on here at home. Dad and I are in the middle of a divorce. We had to move out of our house. We had to move into a new house. He had to change his school, all that stuff. And what I've noticed that he's since coming back from visiting his dad this summer, he's a little bit more anxious. And not only that, now which the teacher has told me, there's a lot of self-criticism. Like, I can't do this work. It's too hard. I can't do it. I'm like those that I've never heard before. So I don't know if this is just him trying to get out of doing the work. And on top of that, he has autism diagnosis and he has ADHD. So
Wow.
there's a lot going on with this poor little thing. But when does I guess my question is it really that he doesn't understand the work, or is he trying to get out of the work? And is this just like a whole combination of the whole transition he went through? So that's what I'm trying to figure out. I hope that kind of makes
Yeah,
sense.
I mean, you have a lot to entangle there. So one thing I would say, I went through a divorce as well with a young child, but then when we got to age 8, that he started having some just difficulties engaging at school and some like acting out behaviors. And so that's just with a divorce. He didn't have other things going on and we hadn't moved. He was going back and forth between houses. And I did put him in some short-term psychotherapy. And what it turned out was that what he did in 8 sessions, it only took 8 sessions, was he talked about the schedule and that he didn't like the schedule because we were doing this schedule that was like 2 days on, 2 days off, 5 days on, 5 days off. And that was a lot of transitioning for him. So even though it was nice for us as parents to see him more often, what he basically asked for is 50-50. Can I do 7 days on, 7 days off? And that's how we changed the schedule. So, you know, I don't want to say you always have to jump to psychotherapy, but sometimes a good child and behaviorally focused therapist who can sort of really listen and figure out what's going on can tease apart and sort of prioritize what the issues are for your kid. You know, definitely, I imagine you probably already have an IEP with some support. And so that's
Yes.
definitely a place to start is, do we need to look at the goals from last year and do we need to look at maybe some different supports or other supports, or is it time to shift some supports? And the fact that he's, you know, for a kid with autism, a lot of times transitions are hard anyway. So if you're
Mhm.
having new school, new living arrangements, new houses, the school year starting after summer, all of that stuff is happening at once and transitions are hard anyway. I imagine that this kid is working so hard to try to manage all of this. So, it's not, you can't take any of those things away, but I would say you might need some support to figure out, like, start with the IEP, figure out what do we want to focus on now first. Maybe it's fine that he doesn't want to do the work and you just want to get him engaged in this transition in a way that is comfortable for him. And he'll have time to catch up on that work. I mean, he's 8. The work is not going to it's not going to be life-changing for him to be a little bit behind in work. Or maybe there's a way to adjust the work so that he can do it in a way that feels more manageable for him. So I would start with your IEP team and see if there are things
Go
that
from
can
there.
support him now, and then maybe get some outside support,
I
especially
was
for
thinking about
you
that.
as a
Mhm.
parent, in terms of how do you support him.
Okay.
So it may not even be putting him in therapy, but maybe you getting some family support, including him in that, but really it's focused on how do you support him
Okay.
and how does the other
Thank you.
parent support, if they're willing to participate. Because
The
It
kid's
makes
in
me-
my dad's in Massachusetts and I'm in Georgia, so
yeah,
and he's
so
not. Yeah.
that's really difficult.
Yeah.
It makes
Thank
me
you.
it just that's such a great example, Lakeisha, I feel like, of that thing where and it's a great reminder, Katja, what you're talking about, where kids aren't always going to say, like, I feel anxious or I don't like transitions, right? Or like so then it's like the decoding, right, of like what they
Yeah.
are saying. And
Yeah,
anyway.
maybe just saying, what's it like for you? Like, just trying to get him to engage in that kind of a discussion in very simple terms. I mean, the iceberg thing might be perfect for him. You know what I mean? Like, what are you thinking and feeling? What am I seeing? And what do I imagine, or what do I wonder about? And where do we think this might be coming from? With you doing some guidance around that. And again, there's other activities, but that was just a really simple one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Katya. You're like a wealth of information. I started this session before we were on video talking about my worries and stressors as an educator, and I feel like you shared some information that is also going to help me. I really, really like the idea of talking with teens in a casual way. I think we get really intense and we want to fix things, and I appreciate your approach to that. And that the idea that anxiety is normal, we all experience it, but there's a point to which we might need to get help. And I really, really support the idea of involving the school in this, because, schools are also part of your kid's life as well, and we all need to work together. So thank you so much. I mean, this was so much information. We are so appreciative. I just want to remind people watching that the first Tuesday of the month, which is today for this month, we do a parent learning session. And then the second Tuesday of the month, we have a parent slash caregiver conversation type time where parents can jump on a Zoom call and meet with us and just talk about parenting, things that are going on, and supports that might be needed. And then finally, we will also be doing the fourth Tuesday of the month. We have a BIPOC affinity group that does the same thing, that meets the fourth Tuesday of the month. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you, everybody.
We're off the live thing, right?
I guess so.
Okay. So Meg